Hi, folks. I'm Laura Wilsey, and I'm here with Mr. Peckman, who is the office quail here at Wilsey Way. Anyways, good way to start the day. We have slips of verbiage as well as technical difficulties here today. So here's a practice of zero. You guys have to stop laughing. Wow, this is fun. This is going to be a great webinar here tonight, folks. We're here at week 2 of the... Heidi, you're not helping. So we do have a lot of fun here, and that's what it's all about here with Horse Speak, because we really... This isn't good. This is what happens when you do live stuff and you don't have... you just roll with it, right? Because the lights went out last week. This is, we had the internet went out on us at the end of our 1 p.m. session today. That was a huge surprise. So let's try this again. Here we are at 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. We welcome all you here with us. And wow, and Heidi is supposed to say something to you, but she's having a tough time.
Okay.
Compose yourself. You need to hold the bird. He might help you.
Oh, who loves
you? Yeah. We actually, Heidi is best friends with Mr. Peckman. He really enjoys having her come over and visit when we do our webinar meetings when we're planning. So there you go, Heidi. I
have to pull it together.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, thanks for joining us. And for those of you that were here at 1, thanks for coming back at 7. I wanted to just let you know that you can hit at the end of the session the raise hand button down on the bottom of your screen. That will pop up, and then we'll be able to ask you about whatever questions you have. Also, feel free to email them into me, and I'll pass them over to Sharon at the end, and we'll get those questions answered for you. It was also really nice last week to get your feedback. We appreciated that very much. It's always good for us. And as you can see, this is live, and we chose to do it live. So hope you got some good laughs in there with us. And it's late, and it's been a really long day. So anyways, but Sharon is sharp, so you'll have a great session. One thing I wanted to mention is most of you probably have the Horse Speak book, and if you don't, you should. But in the winter is when I catch up on reading that's kind of been sitting around, and I haven't gotten through it. And Sharon's second book, Horses in Translation, Carol Merrill over here is demonstrating it, is a fantastic book. And Sharon talked to me about different stories as she was writing it, and I jumped around in the book. But this winter I started reading it cover to cover, and it has just really been amazing. For all of you that are kind of wondering where are we headed with all this information, Sharon shares real life stories of horses all over the country that she's worked with, different breeds, different disciplines, different backgrounds, temperaments, problems. Some are scared, some are aggressive, some are confused, and she's really been able to help their owners sort it out. And so I strongly recommend that you go ahead and get that book as well, because it's going to pull together a lot of the pieces of the puzzle for you as you go through this webinar series.
Some people actually said we wish we released that book first. So yeah, they're really finding great value in reading Horses in Translation and then going right back to Horse Speak. It's really pulling everything together. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Actually, I said the same thing. I started reading it way back when it came out. And I said to Sharon, ooh, I think this one should have come out first. And so I agree with that completely. So you'll get a ton out of it, and it's very easy reading. The stories are fascinating, and you may find yourself in the same situation of some of these people, and then may really help you out. So we're going to take just a minute here and bring Sharon in. Thank you guys for being here with us tonight, and I know you're going to have a great session.
We'll be right with you
at the end. Bye.
Hi, everybody. So here we are today. We're going to have our week 2 session. And today we're going to start with a recap. So let's bring that up. Here we are. All right. So last week we talked about a little bit about my journey and what brought me to Horse Speak, bridging the gap, the 4 F's, going to zero, and a lot more about zero. We talked about mirroring and how that helps us with rapport. We talked about how horses literally see the world and how that affects bubbles of personal space. And we did a little bit with the hold hand. There may have been a couple other things that I threw in there, but basically that was what we covered last week. So this week we're going to talk about one of the biggest features that people have a challenge with horses, which is why are they so scared? They're very timid, as they're such a big creature, but fear is really their go-to. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. And then a little bit about the history of horses, where they come from a paleontology perspective, as well as a little bit of just how they've evolved to where they're at. We're going to go deeper into the bubbles of personal space. We're going to talk about some roles in the herd, protectors and map makers. We'll talk about the sentry a little bit. And we're going to mention approaching and greeting. And then there's a couple of ideas. Making a sandwich, pieces of the pie, and spiraling into the bubble are elements of horses using their bubbles for communication, and how we can then start to emulate that to understand their way of communicating and start to move our bodies into their way to keep building that rapport. Okay. So I just want to reiterate that horse speak comes from horses. And when I say that, I mean it literally. Now, I had this wonderful advantage. I was working with a lot of rescue horses, and the work I was doing with people privately was usually because it was a remedial horse. It was a horse that, someone was having a hard time with. So I was in the opportunity to try something out. So I would learn something from my studies, and then I would go and I would do this body mechanic with as many horses as I could. And if I could get, 5 or 7 horses to agree that, okay, when you move your hand like that, I have this response to it. And that was how I could define and redefine my body's micro movements with a horse's body's movements and line them up so that it made sense to horses. And it was always their feedback. So what I mean by that is, if they have a long neck and a long head and 4 legs and a long body, and they use all the buttons on their body, and we're going to talk about buttons a little bit next week, but they use all the buttons on their body to communicate with. And I have a tall body and a short neck and a little face, but these long arms and these hands that I do things with. So those are really different body shapes. And one of the challenges I think that we have, not only in the fact that we want different things than horses want, but the fact that our bodies are shaped differently, and that we do a lot of gesturing with our hands to emphasize what we're saying, whereas horses don't gesture to emphasize what they're saying. What they're doing with their body is what they're saying. So there's a little different platform. So the opportunity I had was to say, okay, I've seen horses do this thing in this way, fast and slow. Now I need to do that thing too. And I need to make sure that it makes sense, so that if I meet a wild horse, if I meet a Mustang, or I meet a horse who hasn't had good socialization, or one that's, really scared or become really aggressive, I need to make sure that what I don't have to worry about is the gesturing that I'm doing, are the signals that I'm giving something that horses inherently understand, because I don't want to waste time trying to figure out, does this horse understand me? So luckily I was able to do that. I was able to really bring it there. So horse speak uses the language of the horse to build rapport and the desire to follow us. And I think this is the thing that really brings it to a different level. So when you're communicating with a horse in their own language, or our version of their language, what happens is the horses see you differently. And when they start to see you differently, that's where the inner desire of the horse to be with us, to be connected with us in a new way, comes into play. So this is really important. So we're learning how to initiate, build, and then rely upon rapport the same way that they do. So here in the pictures to the left, there's the bay horse greeting the halflinger. And then there's me greeting the same bay horse a little bit later, using the same basic posture. So I hope you can see from these 2 pictures that my posture, with my arm and hand simulating the length of the neck and head, but my eyes are looking into his eyes, and I'm breathing in a similar way. I have to use my mouth to breathe, and he can use his nostrils, but the sound is the same sound. So a huffing breath sounds like, right? That's a huffing breath. I might even do 3, like that. And they're going to flare their nostrils to do that same breath. But it's similar enough that the horse says, hey, you're greeting me. This is really cool. And right away, they start to see you differently. So training comes from people, and it involves our own ideas about what we want horses to do. So in these 3 pictures, you see some really interesting, either bareback and bridleless or liberty stuff. And this is really fun. I mean, having a horse, the girl in the middle, she's riding the horse bareback and bridleless and shooting a bow and arrow. How cool is that? He's riding a horse bareback and bridleless and getting on a pedestal. She's at liberty with a horse. He's doing this amazing, looks like a Spanish walk. So none of that is bad. I mean, that's all really cool. That's really interesting. But it's all our idea. Okay, and so to get there, the training that it took to get there would have had to include some level of building rapport, building trust, building respect, building an ability to communicate with each other. Now, I have had situations where I'm working with a horse that might be a performance horse. He may be dressage horse, or he's a show jumper, or he does liberty work. And yet there's another area of that horse's life where he's not at 0, or he doesn't feel rapport. So he's fine. He's a big ham bone. He loves to get out in front of the audience and show off. But then when you're leading him back to the stall, he's nipping, or he's dancing in the aisle, or he's uncomfortable. So my point is that we can have both. We can have rapport and training. They can go together. And if you're understanding horse speak, you're basically setting up a situation where you're building the rapport first. So that's what we're going into today. That's what we're really talking about, is how can I build up my communication skills and get that rapport going first, instead of I'm going to do all this training stuff and hopefully within the training some relationship and some rapport get built. This is, let's have relationship and rapport that's organic and natural, and it just happens because we're communicating. And now because of the rapport, we're going to go do some stuff. We're going to do some training, and that'll be fun for both of us. So here, the foundation of building rapport. Why do horses need so much reassurance? The picture on the left, you're going to see as the woman is walking away, the horse has already gone here, and it's looking off into the distance. So how many times do we turn a horse loose, and that's where they take that posture? I call that posture scan the horizon. And then I'm here with the chestnut, and she's hitting that posture. And so I went ahead and blew away the boogeyman. I did the sentry breath, which is like that. And she had cocked that ear back to me and started to come back to me with her mind and her thinking. The reason that this is important is because they are in a situation in their life where they need to feel that reassurance all the time. And some people are like, why? They're so big. Why do they need that reassurance all the time? So here, if you see the pictures to the left, you see a cave painting, then you see a Przewalski horse, and then you see a Mustang. And the point of this is that horses are only a few generations away from returning to their roots. So some of the physical features that the Przewalski horse is demonstrating are the thick, short neck, the big head, short, stocky legs, short, stocky shoulders, bigger area for the belly for digestion, short back, powerful hindquarters. So you see that when horses are returning to their natural state, a lot of the Mustangs, you'll see the shorter neck, the bigger head, shorter legs, bigger bellies. And that is nature's version of a horse. Nature said, this is a good animal. This animal is not going to break its leg. It can turn on a dime. It has plenty of room to digest its food. That head and neck doesn't have to do too much to get down to the ground and back up again. So here, the horse who's turning and looking back at us is also looks like a kind of buckskin. Maybe it's a dun. But you can see in the eyes that there's a connection, but there's also a wildness. That's always there. It's right underneath the surface. So why are horses so afraid? Once upon a time, according to paleontologists, horses were Eohippus, which is this tiny little creature about the size of a cat. And in their mind, in their DNA, in their genetic code, they remember this. maybe not consciously, but there was a time when, I think they called this a terror bird. There was a time when there was some big predators and horses were very small animals. So when they're nervous about a bag moving or a bird flapping or trees moving, there's a reason for that, let alone lions and tigers and bears and wolves and all those kinds of things. So there's a point in time when this was a chief source of food for a lot of other predators. So it's only natural for them to still be skeptical. And they've become a very large animal, but they didn't start out that way. When we started domesticating horses, if you look at these, the statue and the drawings and the illustrations of paintings, you'll see that most of the early horses were really small. They weren't that much bigger than the Przewalski horse because they were still being required to do a lot of hard, intense work, and that short, stocky body type is a little bit sturdier, a little stronger, and we just hadn't been able to get horses into a bigger frame quite yet. However, over time, we figured it out, and we have now bred horses to be really, really big. That guy looks like 18 hands to me. And also really, really tiny. That's a dwarf mini underneath him. So, and the little kid, he's so cute. So the idea here is just that we have intervened and we have taken things into our own hands, and we've cultivated the size and the speed that we're looking for the job that we wanted horses to do. But inside, in their DNA, in their genetic code, there's still a very small animal in their brain. And so the world is a dangerous place to them. And literally, stuff still happens. Somebody wrote to me recently that a dog had broken into their paddock and bit a bunch of their horses. So, stuff still really does happen to them. So we're just going to recap a little bit. Pardon me. So horse speak is from horses. And we're going to have a tendency to want to use it for our training, and we want to use it to build rapport. We want to use it to enhance whatever it is we're trying to do. Maybe all you're trying to do, you have a rescue horse and you just want to get a halter on it and lead it from A to B without it being a trauma. Maybe what you want to do is get over a bigger jump. Maybe what you want to do is compete. Maybe what you want to do is go for a long trail ride. I don't know what you want to do. But all I do know is that when you have rapport as your foundation, then the things that you want to get done are less threatening. Those things themselves are less threatening because you're the leader. You are the one who's providing that sense of safety. So training is from people. Training, I always think of training more as education. So the horse is at a good, balanced place in their mind, and they demonstrate balance in their body and in their emotional state. Now, that horse is ready for some education. So we're going to move on now. We're going to talk a little bit deeper about the bubbles of personal space. So the first part here, we're going to talk about approaching and greeting, which is saying hello, and how herds organize themselves. So last week, we talked a little bit about the bubbles around a horse that they see around themselves. They're seeing the bubble and that they're inside a bubble, and I mentioned the quadrants. So now we're going to start to break some of those quadrants down. So when horses come together to greet, they will do it with the front. It's like an arrow in the front of the bubble coming together. Now, if they have a lot of intensity, they'll arch their pole. If they don't have a lot of intensity, they'll stretch out their neck and their head. But they're going to greet in the muzzle area. When they approach each other, this is a very important moment for establishing how this initial greeting is going to be. So you can see the horses on the left are looking at each other. And this is a myth that we shouldn't look our horses in the eye. You should absolutely look your horse in the eye. Just do it softly. If you're staring, that would not be, I wouldn't want to be looked in the eye like that either. But if you're blinking, you're smiling, hi, how are you? How are you feeling? And I'm not saying to baby talk. I'm just saying a soft look, because horses use their eyes to give each other a lot of information. And so you want to be utilizing your eyes to also give a lot of information. You just want to make sure that they're relaxed. Now, in the picture to the left, right, sorry, you see them greeting over grass. And again, I mentioned this last week, I'm going to mention it again. That is perfectly polite in horse to eat your lunch and say hello or whatever else you need to say. So if the horse is grazing but turns their head and looks in your direction while grazing, they are welcoming you. They are greeting, they're acknowledging, they're saying, I see you. I'm lining up in the line that you're in. I'm lining up in the front of your bubble. I'd like to get connected, or I'm welcoming you to get connected to me. So the approaching is important to them. And approaching is important to us. Something that's been very interesting to me is to realize that our two societies, horse society and human society, surprisingly have a lot of similar rules of conduct. So we like to be approached forward, but not too forward. And we like to have a little bit of a bowing gesture. Even if we're shaking hands, you're going to extend that, and then you're going to step away and give some space. So when you're approaching a horse, you want to have confidence, but you don't want to be too rigid or uptight. You want to make sure that you're having a little bit of your zero. And you even want to maybe demonstrate it by just showing politeness. Now, people have said to me, well, if I bend over and I show politeness to the horse, and he's higher than me, then he's bigger than me in the pecking order, and now he's looking like the leader and I'm not. But it's the opposite. The one who demonstrates the way it should be is the leader. So when you see horses coming together, the one who's dropping their head is the one saying, let's keep this low. Let's relax this. Let's have a lower kind. And if neither of them can do that and they both greet like this, then you might be followed with like a squeal or something more intense to make a point. So we don't want to be like bumper cars. You don't want to just walk up to a horse willy-nilly, unaware of how you're approaching, or the fact that if you're on the side of the bubble of the quadrant, then you could be putting pressure there. You could be signaling them to actually move away. If you're coming from the back of the horse or around another part of the horse, it's a little awkward for them. They can do it. They can deal with us, and they'll often just turn around to get in the right position. But just be aware. Now, when horses greet, they use a specific spot right between the nostrils. And you'll see when I'm greeting this mare here over the stall wall. Again, it's important to keep an artificial bubble between you and the horse when you're practicing these things, if you can. I highly recommend it because it allows you to stay zero and allows your horse to stay zero, because you can't actually invade each other. So if something goes wrong, or you don't know what you're doing, or the horse gets stressed, whatever happens, they can step back and you can step back. So you're not glued to them. You're not stuck on a lead rope, or you're not in a big wide open field where, now what do I do? So when they do touch, it's right between the nostrils for greeting. And if they leak to the side of a nostril, it's a different meaning. There's all kinds of meanings, from going to a nostril to going to a lip to going to the play button. And we'll talk about more of that as time goes on. But for now, I just want you to think about, it's a soft touch, and it's right here, and it's not a punch, and it's not a wet noodle hand either. It's just a soft, you get in, hello, and then you get out. And that's it. So the next thing that's important to know about working with the bubbles in the front is what I call go away face. So when they want to yield that quadrant to another horse, they'll just move their face, and that's a low calorie way to say, you can have the space, I'll give it to you. Now, the horses down there in the left are both yielding their face away at the same time. So that's mutual politeness, but I would say there's some other things possibly going on. So the brown horse is looking right at the camera, so probably he had noticed someone taking his picture and is looking. The black horse has his head lower, and so he's following the gaze of the brown horse. So the brown horse in that moment is leading the idea. The brown horse is saying, what about that camera guy? The black horse is saying, well, I'm not going to look at the camera guy, I'm going to look at you. I'll follow you, by having his head lower. So just having the head higher and lower denotes who's making a choice point, or who's having a thought to make a choice, and who's saying, no, I'll follow that. Now, in the picture up to the right, I am touching the go away face button, which is at the cheek of the gray mare there. And even though I'm over a stall, the very next thing horses do with each other is this go away face. And so I'm saying to her, give me a little room. Now, why that's important is because it's a low calorie way to say, give me a little space. Let's clarify the space first. The other thing that it says is who's leading, who's following, and it's just low calorie. It doesn't take any effort and it doesn't create any stress. And so this is a really key point. After the greeting, there's a little go away face. Now, technically in a full greeting ritual, there are 3 touches. And if you're not getting all 3 touches from your horse, you're getting 1 and 2, and then they kind of go away face and leave. They're just saying, if that's a rescue horse or something, they're just saying not ready. And if you're getting a not ready, okay, go either help them get ready by doing some things that are a nice offer, or walk away, come back. As long as you come back within 20 minutes or half an hour, that next touch is number 3. They're remembering, they're not forgetting, that next touch is number 3. And I just want to point that out because some people say, oh, I get 2 touches, but I can't seem to get the 3rd touch. Sometimes also the 3rd touch, they'll come in almost and not do it. So then if it's a shy horse, I might say, hey, it's okay. We can make this connection. Because number 3 is where they linger for a minute. There's that huffing breath I talked about. And they're like, what are we going to do next? So when you've got number 3, you're clear to do the next thing. And the next thing needs to be the go away face, because establishing who's moving who by doing this little quiet ritual is really essential to them. If you have a joker or a horse with, didn't get a lot of socialization, or there's any number of reasons why horses can get overreactive to this or underreactive to it, or it seems like they've never heard of it before. You might have to do it a couple of times, or in certain horses, you might have to do it every time you see them until they get it. But it's natural to them. So always remember, this is horse talking to horse, and we're trying to emulate that. So the next thing we're going to talk about in terms of the bubbles is making a sandwich. So one day I was sitting with my friend Heidi, and she has this beautiful porch that looks out over all this sprawling pasture land, and her horses are down there grazing. And it was a great place to sit and do some herd observation. So we had a really nice time sitting, either the 2 of us or sometimes with groups, and watching what the horses were doing. And then we started to realize that one of her more insecure horses was constantly getting in between 2 of the leader horses when it was time to take a nap. And this started to go on, and she's like, I think I've always seen him do that, but I never really thought about it before. And I started to really pay attention to it. And then I said, I'm going to watch for this in any other group situation that I'm in with, as I'm traveling all around the country and doing clinics and meeting so many people and their horses. Anytime there was several horses in a group, I was watching, and sure enough, this kept happening over and over again. So I made more of a note of it. And then I realized, you know what? I need a sandwich, give me some bookends, is a pretty solid phenomenon. And it filled in some blanks. So I'm always learning too. I'm always going back to the horses and going, oh, teach me about the sandwich. So here we go. Here's some sandwiching. And the bottom line of sandwiching is that there's a horse in front who is one of the leaders, and there's a horse behind who's a protector. And there can also be a horse behind another horse that's following. So maybe it's a younger horse, or a mare, and her foal's gotten a little bit bigger. So he's not at the girth point all the time anymore. Maybe he's not behind her. But so the hip button can be follow me, but it can also be protect me. So the buttons can mean all kinds of things. But for simplification, they have a lineup, and they know where they need to be in that lineup so that they know who they're following, and they know who's got their back or who needs to follow them. And ideally, the middle of the herd horses like to be just that. They like to be in the middle of the herd. They don't want to make the decisions about where to go. They don't want to be worried about kicking the coyotes if they show up. They really want to be sandwiched between all the other horses. That's the most comfortable spot. And I'm going to say most of us have middle of the herd horses. The true leaders, the real ones that make decisions about where you're going to go, or the sentry who makes a decision about, is it is it bad? Is it scary? Should we run? Or the protectors, we're going to talk about the protectors in a second. Most of the time, we don't have those horses. Most of horses are the middle of the herd types. So we're going to talk a little bit about the protectors. Now, this is my horse, Rocky, and he is a protector. I literally watched him protect. It's in my book, The Horses in Translation. It's a good story about it, where a Rottweiler had come in the pen to attack the horses, and he took care of it. And I will show you a picture of not him, but them. So here's a couple of really amazing pictures of equines, a donkey and a zebra, fulfilling their protector role. And this may be a little surprising to some people, but it's not always the biggest horse, the stallion with the big arched neck, that does this role. It can be one of the little guys. And the stallion maybe is the driver who's making sure everyone stays together, but there may be another horse, an older mare or something, who's like, I got it, I'll kick it. So you never know who the protector really is, but there's always a protector, at least one, in a healthy wild herd. The other part of the healthy wild herd, again, I'm always referring back to the wild state, because that's what's in the DNA of a horse. Even though they're living in a domestic world with us, in their mind, in their DNA, this is where they're coming from. So the map makers, those are the ones out in front. And if you look at the faces here on the horses to the left, you can see there's a steadiness, there's a stillness. They look more zero. You can look at their expressions, and you look at the horse being ridden on the right, and you just look at that expression. There's a quality to their movements. They have a heavier set to their chest. They're anchored in their movements. There's a heaviness to their stepping. And because all the message that they're giving is, you're okay. I know where we're going, and we're not going to rush to get there, and just follow me, and we're going to walk single file. And if you notice, in a lot of these pictures, horses are walking, maybe trotting, but a lot of walking. Something I want to point out is that, yeah, horses run, and they can even have fun running, but nature says conserve your energy, because if you are a wild horse, if you look at those pastures out there in the left, there's not a lot to eat. There's not a lot of great stuff. It takes a lot to digest it. It takes a lot to get fuel from it. So what you don't want to do is waste fuel. So having that leader be calm and steady is really essential to the health and well-being of the whole herd. So the sentry horse, the watcher. Now, there's been a lot of questions about the sentry position and what is sentry and how do I be sentry. What we see here is the bay mare on the right is being sentry for that moment. She's looking, she's also huffing her nostrils really loud. She's in the most upright position she can be in. And there's me on the other side, I'm being sentry for the chestnut mare. And we want to look like the sentry, because the sentry is the horse in the herd that has the best acuity and are the ones who do that big breath. It's that big breath, and you'll see deer do that breath, and other prey animals do that breath. And it clears the nose so that they can get a better smell. It also makes a loud sound happen. And if a predator isn't paying attention, that sound happens, they might jolt a little bit. And then the horse can say, I see you. So that it serves a couple of different purposes. It also alerts the rest of the herd, uh-oh, there might be trouble over there. Now, just for clarity's sake, if you have a horse who does that a lot, and they look away a lot, and they're very looky, that's not a sentry. That's one of the middle of the herd types. That's a scaredy cat, or a joker who's looking to stir things up. But that's one of the middle horses. They're saying, I don't know what's dangerous, not dangerous. I think everything is dangerous. And that's why we want to take on the sentry position. Because a real sentry horse will acknowledge, will say, I'm looking. If the herd is worried and they're looking at something, they'll say, okay, what is that? And then they'll put their head down. That's nothing. That's fine. My sentry horse in my herd almost never blows sentry. Almost never. The other horses might get real looky and look at something. And if she lifts her head up, puts it right back down again, then they, okay. If she ever blows sentry at something, the whole herd just, oh, uh-oh, she blew sentry at something. So we want to use it at first to soothe their frayed nerves, because they're just saying, there's no sentry in my life. I don't know how to tell what's dangerous. So first you want to be like, okay, I've got it. That and that and that, boogeyman everywhere. And then you want to bring it down and be like, now I need you to trust me that I will watch out for you. So at a certain point, you start to bring that down. So the whole point of understanding what these roles are is to become the anchor for your horse. So some horses might need a little bit of everything. They need the hold, protector position. They need a map maker. They need a sentry, because they're just really middle of the herd types. And they're like, I need all of it. Some are naturally a mentor. They're already one of these, or a couple of them, because they can be, a couple of different things. Like you have a map maker who also is a protector, or a sentry who's also a map maker. It's not like a hard and fast rule, but those are the delineations to think about. So in this image, the black horse is running. She's a middle of the herd type, and she gets very panicky. And so there she goes. And the Andalusian there is in his hold position. So he's like, okay, she's going to run. I'm going to stand here and hold the fort until she's ready to come back. And so I'm moving into the picture in my O posture to line up with him. And this is an important point. We talked about mirroring last week, and I want to just bring in, because some people have had some really good questions. These are great questions coming in. You want to mirror your horse so that you can get in harmony with the horse you have, but you also want to start looking around for who is the anchor in the herd that you know. So is there a mentor? Is there this calm, anchored, zero type of horse like Zeke here, like the chestnut horse here? And you want to start to imitate them, because those are the movements and the breathing and the postures that all the other horses are saying, he's my guy. He makes sure that I feel safe. So becoming the anchor for your horse means you can fulfill whatever role they're needing you to fulfill. And also you can fulfill some roles for the horses who are the mentors. So let's say you do have you have an amazing mentor. Good for you. You're so lucky. That's awesome. And he's got it, and he's always steady Eddie. Well, if you blow sentry for him one day, he's going to say, oh, well, that's nice. If you do a hold hand for him, oh, yeah, well, I don't think you need to kick any coyotes, but that's a nice offer. So it's a great way for any horse for you to just step in and say, hey, I'm here for you. And then that deepens the rapport. So when horses are in conflict, generally they're in the same place in the hierarchy, and that's where a real conflict is erupting. And so in this situation, these are two stallions, and so they're two band stallions, so they're in conflict because they hold the same place in the space that they live in. The other situation where you have real conflict happening is when you have a bully. And in nature, bullies do occur, but you have all these other roles, the mentors and the leaders and the map makers and the protectors. You have all these other roles. So bullies happen, and in a well-balanced herd, that horse is going to maybe keep people on their toes, not let everybody get too lazy, because we want to make sure we can get up and run when we need to. But the leaders of a healthy wild herd are always going to curtail that. They're going to say, that's enough. They have a way to say, put that away. You're done. In a domestic situation, horses are stalled, or they live in a pasture. They've got 3 horses they live with in a paddock, and that's it. That's what they've got. And so if a horse is a bully, it's usually because they lack of socialization, or they had some negative experience, or maybe the horses in that paddock are too similar and no one's rising to the top to be a leader. So no one's really feeling safe and confident. And the only good news that I have to give you here is that as you learn to bring yourself into these roles, as you learn what they look like, what they feel like, how to model them, the horses that you're interacting with start to see you that way, and they start to shift and know that my person is that. My person is that, so I don't need to be so tense. And then the whole herd starts to say, we don't need to be, there's a guardian here. So we don't need to be so tense. So we, believe it or not, can have a huge influence even on all the horses in a barn. So we don't want to look like competitors in the hierarchy. We want to look like a leader who has their zero. And in this situation, I had only met these horses, I don't know, 20 minutes before or something. And we'd gone through working the bubbles a little bit and greeting and some go away face. And the Haflinger, he's adorable, but he's a little bit of a joker. He's kind of into everything. And the Bay there is his mentor. And he was constantly like, put it away, stop that. And kind of bringing him into better harmony and trying to watch out for him all the time. So when I was able to do both fingers and just say, go away face, I want some space, and they moved their faces to either side of my hand, you see that the mentor dropped his head even more because he was signaling to me, yes, this is good, I like this, but he was also signaling, yes, this is good because you've got him, I can have a break. So that was great. And you can see the Haflinger is doing what I'm asking him to do, but he's got this expression and his ears are sideways, so that's good. He has an expression on his face and his lips. And he's just like, but what else could I get into? So it's not going to make him not be who he is, but it was a way to easily create some breathing room for this conversation. So level 4 intensity, if you've read the books, if you've looked at the DVD, I talk about intensity levels. So level 4 intensity, where we get into some of the more interesting aspects of training in the horse's education, and we have bigger energy and we're doing interesting things with it. That can only really happen well if your zero is deeply established. Because if you don't have a deep physical, mental, and emotional zero with the horse, so you have to have it and the horse has to have it, then you don't have a platform. So you go big, and now what? How do you come back down? So you can teach your horse, put your head down, but he can put his head down physically. That doesn't mean that internally it did him any favors. So it's just really important to think that before we want to get to level 4 intensity in our work with horses as we go forward, it's very important to be understanding these roles at a low intensity, at the low calorie conversations. So what do we have here? Okay. No one wants to get hurt. I found this picture and it's adorable, and I just thought I would throw it in here. So it's an antique. So the idea that equines can cause problems, it's been around for a long time. And knowing that we can be in the wrong place at the wrong time and have the wrong answer is not new to anybody. And what I'm really trying to do here with Horse Speak and with you all is to just say, look, there's a way to understand what their values are, their needs are, where they're coming from, what their DNA is hardwired to be looking out for. And there's a way to work yourself into their paradigm and their social system that is really not that hard. I actually had someone that I was talking to recently, and she was saying, help, I've got to get my horse out of this paddock, and there's all these other horses, and I've been trying to do this for months, and I'm just not having a lot of success. And so I gave her a couple of little tidbits of advice, and she wrote back like 3 days later, and she said, oh my gosh, it's already working. And not only that, but the mentor, the lead horse, is now following me everywhere. And she's like, but how can that be? How can it be so fast? And so a lot of us have gotten used to the idea that this is going to take forever. And to be fair, if a horse is really traumatized, they've really got some issues, they've had a lot of pain, so they're very skeptical, there's reasons why things can take quite a long time. But honestly, when you allow yourself to step into active zero, so you're in your zero internally, but now you're in roles of leadership that the horse can easily recognize, you'd be surprised at how quickly things can turn around. So good training should almost be boring. People are like, oh gosh. We like to watch things move. we like to have things go. We like to see that I've accomplished something. We have goals, we have agendas. But any trainer that I've ever met who is a really good trainer is like, yeah, you go to a performance and you're at like an expo or something, and you got to make it look good. But really, when you're at home in your own place and you're training, stuff is slow and patient. And you create something really solid, and then you layer one thing on top of that. And you let that set, and then you link and you layer another thing on top of that. And you link and layer and link and layer until you've created something that has nothing but good rapport from the start to the finish. So what you want to be able to take away from this webinar is the ability to deepen your rapport so that you can tell that you're having this effectiveness, that you can arrive at a point where the horse chooses to stay engaged. Like this gray mare over the stall was always going to the back of the stall. She didn't turn and look at anybody. So here I'm in my O posture, I'm just relaxing, I'm taking some breath, and she's choosing to engage, which was new for her. And here the mare in the field who's with me, and she's dropped her head and she's in a deep relaxation. So normally she wouldn't do that. So the point is to go slow to go faster. All right, so we're going to talk now about the other part of the quadrants, which is the girth line and the girth button. So now you can see we have broken the horse into the horizontal. And this is important because this is how horses line up this way. So we talked about how they line up this way, sandwich front to back, and how that's important. Greeting in the front, following each other from the back, different reasons why they would do those movements. Now we're going to talk about how they line up side to side. So when you look at this picture, you can see that the girth buttons are all lined up in the horses that are in movement. And you can easily look around and see horses that are bending towards other horses. There's a flow in the bend. So if you've ever seen a flock of birds flying or fish swimming, there's this amazing proprioception in herd animals or animals that move together in units, where they are able to stay oriented so that in the movements everyone goes left really fast, no one trips. And how horses are able to do that is through being aware of the girth button. And all the way back, we're reusing this picture from last week, the mothers and the babies. Remember, the very first lesson that babies learn is keep your eye on mommy's girth, so that you know where I am and you know how to keep up, you know how to stay with me, you know how to turn left, turn right, stop, all that kind of stuff. So this is the most important thing that they learn the day that they're born. So last week we used these pictures for talking about mirroring, because the horses are in harmony with each other. They're doing the same thing at the same time in the same way. That creates harmony. They're also lined up at the girth. And so the girth button creates a line. Last week we talked about they can fan in or they can fan out. And they're going to do that orienting through the girth, because that is the center point of the balance of their body. So it's the central pivot point. So through the girth, the whole body, the whole mechanism of the whole body can shift more towards the front, more towards the back, or towards one direction or another. So it's very crucial for them for sharing bonded experiences. So when you see horses that are lined up next to each other, those are bonded horses. And this picture just warms my heart. So the girth button equals togetherness. And here's two little tiny babies. And there they are, sharing their girth button, sharing their togetherness. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. So the girth button for horses is a really important place. Now here we have horses in play. And we can see here that the girth buttons are lined up. No matter what they're doing, there's an orientation to each other's girth buttons, because what they're also saying is, we're playing and we're being guys and we're roughhousing and we're together. We're still together. We're still a team. I'm not fighting you. I'm just playing with you. As opposed to this girth button and rivals. You can see when they mean business, when two horses are real rivals, they're going to start out maybe face to face and squealing and going higher and higher, but eventually it's going to turn into girth on girth, because that's how you knock your opponent over. So the girth button in us. So it has come into our awareness for many, many years that a horse who's going around you on the lunge or free schooling or in the round pen or whatever we're doing with a horse, that you really want to have them oriented. You want to have yourself oriented to the girth, and you want to have them bending around you. And if they're flat or straight or counter bending, then we think of that as a problem, and that, it's not good for their frame and it's not good for their balance and yada, yada, yada. But instinctively, what we're really going for is that a horse who's bent around you is with you. So if a horse is bending around you, that girth is with you. They're saying, I'm lined up with you. You and I are a team. We're together. There's nothing to fear here. I can relax and I can listen to what you're suggesting, and we can move together. So even though the person will be in the center sometimes of a circle, if you're lunging or free schooling or any reason why the horse is going around you, so I'm not technically going anywhere, but I'm going somewhere in the horse's mind. We're going somewhere together. I just happen to be holding that pivot point, and they happen to be making the pivot. So we really want to have a soft and connected relationship with that girth button. It's very important. So we're going to talk a little bit about spiraling into their bubble. And here is a mare, this very sweet little mare, who had a lot of nervousness. She was very timid. That day, I believe, when they had put her in the round pen, she'd been bucking, and she was really worried about it before I got there. So in the first picture, you can see I'm going through the fence to blow away sentry and to greet her muzzle and to make connection with her. And then she's willing to lower her head and relax with me as I'm dropping my head also. So she's starting to mirror, she's starting to get connected with me. And I'm going to do this kind of stuff on the outside of a fence again, because I want to build rapport. I want that horse to find their zero. I want to stay at my zero. So if she does spook, if she takes off bucking and kicking or something happens, I don't want my heart rate to go up. I want my heart rate to stay low. So I'm setting myself up for success by doing it this way. So no matter what she does, my answer is, meh, I'm fine. You can do that if you want to. I'm going to look all the way back to that picture a few slides ago of Zeke standing there. Mummy horse, the black horse, is running off. Zeke's like, I'm just going to stand here. When you're done running, you can come back. So having that attitude is great. And all of a sudden, this horse who was standoffish and didn't want to come by is not wanting to leave. So she could go anywhere in the round pen, and she didn't want to. She wanted to stay with me. So in the third picture where I go in and I'm actually with her, you can see her head is a little higher. She gets a little stiffer. So now I've closed the bubbles, and I'm working on our connectedness through the bubbles, and I'm now in with her. And so that had challenged her a little more. And finally, by the fourth picture, after, I don't know, this was maybe a half an hour session with her, she ended by giving me a hug, which is very sweet. And it shows that she was willing to start to bend around me, and they will start to bend. That's the go away face button, but now it's a come towards me. So if you start off with giving me the right space, you can end with now bring yourself in. And we'll talk more about that in the upcoming weeks. So here's an exercise that we have been practicing in our clinics, and it's called reverse round pen. And in this particular one, we're also doing what's called a serpentine. So we're moving in a predictable pattern. All the people are going to follow the leader, and we're going to move in a predictable pattern. Reverse round pen is a really interesting idea, and it's very powerful. I want you to know that I would want anyone trying this to be very mindful and careful. I lead this in workshops. Heidi leads this in her workshops now. And this is a powerful tool, but if you're not sure, if you're with a herd of horses you don't know, or you're not sure of what you're doing or how you're doing it, use common sense, for gosh sakes. Like, don't set yourself up to get hurt or to be in a situation that it's going to get out of control. But reverse round pen is very powerful, because what it says is, hey horse, you don't move. I'm going to go all the way around the perimeter. And the reason that that's important to horses is we're going all the way back to them being this tiny little animal in their head. And all these protector roles, sentry roles, mat maker. A horse who's in that kind of responsibility role is also, when they're introduced into a new environment, going to check the environment first, and you can watch it happen. And I'm sure that people think, oh, I've seen my mare do that, or I've seen my gelding do that. So when you do reverse round pen, you're saying, hey, horse, hold on. Here's my hold hand. Both of them are up. I don't want to talk to you yet. I don't want you in my bubble. I'm not going to get in your bubble. I'm not, I don't want anything. It's like moving down the movie, crossing over people's legs in the aisle. Excuse me, sorry. So you're saying, I don't want anything yet. I'm going to go check the fences. I'm going to check some rocks. I'm going to throw a couple of rocks. I'm going to look at that tree for a second. The reason why that's so important is because you're saying to a horse, I've got your back. I'm going to check this environment before I get connected in these bubbles. Okay. So this is a really cool thing to do. If you do have to go get horses from a herd, a lot of people have their horse out in the herd and they have to deal with it. This is a one thing you can try to move through that herd. Okay. So just to summarize, here we have a demo I was doing in Minnesota, and we have after the horses said hello to me, then they went and they created their herd of two. So in the first picture up on the left, the bay mare was the map maker, and she said to the bigger gelding, she said, all right, you follow me. I'm going to go check things out. And she went and she sniffed 5 to 7 things along the wall, fences and rocks and posts and things. And she was very insistent that he sniff them too, because she's like, I'm doing something. I'm checking out the environment. I want you to know that you need to pay attention to that. Because he was a little bit like, what's going on over there? And she would wait and wait and wait until he came and sniffed it too. And then she would take a big breath and move on to the next thing. And she did that until she felt confident that he was going to trust her decision making. Then they moved to the next phase where they lined up their girths and they moved around. They changed direction 3 times. And that's in general when horses are going somewhere together and they're lining up those girth buttons and getting in harmony, they will change direction at least 3 times, sometimes more, but you'd be surprised. It's often you go 1, 2, 3, they're done. So that's really important to note. And then they ended in the hold position. She had wanted a protector. She had signaled that to me earlier in the day in the conversation I was having with her. And so she ended with him looking out. So he's facing the opposite direction. Their girth lines are lined up, but he's facing the opposite direction. Her head is lower because she does not want to be the sentry. His head is higher because he is a good sentry. So he's a good watcher. And that's what she wanted. She's like, you are the protector. You keep an eye. I'm going to lower my head. That's not what I want to do. I know where we're going, but you need to protect us as we're going there. So this is just a fun way to see, look, it's all happening, and you can see it kind of all coming together. So just to recap, we went over why horses need to feel protected, why they feel so scared, why they're wondering, are things safe? We went over the bubbles of personal space. We went deeper into that. We went into approaching and greeting, sandwiching, why, where, and how, and a lot more ideas about who's leading, who's following, who wants to be the middle guy. Thinking about horses that are the protectors, the map makers, the sentries, the postures that they take, the way that they look, the quality of intention that they give off. The girth button, lining up, fanning in, fanning out, making that connection. And finally, spiraling into the bubble. How can we start to use some of this awareness to enhance our rapport with our horses at this level? So for you guys, for the homework, really, I know a lot of you have to go get a horse or work with a horse, but as much as you can, try to do hands-off, try to watch. You're really at a place where a lot of our minds have been so habituated to seeing what we think we're seeing, and now you're asking your mind to go a little bit deeper and really, really see what's there. So take some time to take a big breath and watch. See if you can see some of these roles. Can you see the sandwiching? Can you see the roles that they're playing? Can you see them lining up? Are they fanning in? Are they fanning out? And take some pictures or do some art. If you're an artist on any level, do some sketches. Practice approaching with confidence. you know, making sure that when you approach, you're approaching the front line of a horse. If you're approaching a horse, just FYI, and they turn their head, you might have hit the edge of their bubble and they may be saying, I respect you, you're coming on a little strong. So when they turn their face away, they're never saying, I don't want you. They're saying, okay, you can have this quadrant. I'm giving it to you. So if you find that, you might just stop, maybe even take one step back, maybe look away yourself to say, okay, good job. Take a breath and then keep approaching. So you want to have confidence, but you don't want to come across like a type A personality, because that's going to feel a little intense to them. And then spiraling in. So how can you use barriers to help yourself learn? How can you use barriers to work your way into a bubble? And how can you use so you can use your own hands as a bubble barrier and say, I have a bubble, you have a bubble, let's not merge bubbles until we're both ready. Because again, this part is about let's stay safe and let's build that rapport. All right, so we're going to take time now to answer a couple of questions.
So if you can just raise your hand, if you see a little hand at the bottom of your screen, we will find you and we will unmute your microphone so you can ask your question. And we're just looking to see.
Yeah. So
we actually have a couple written in questions.
Two raised hands there.
Where did it go?
Right there.
There they are.
There they are. Okay.
Just 1 second. And we're going to unmute. It says owner. So here you are.
Okay. Whoever's screen name is owner, you're on.
Can you hear me? It's Erin.
Hi, Erin.
Hi. I wrote in one of the questions, I've been volunteering at a rescue, and when I first got there, they said, stay away from the wild Mustang. She's dangerous.
Yeah.
And I've been practicing horse speak for now 2 years. And so I've made progress with other horses. And now they'll tell me sometimes, we'll go into Gypsy's stall and get this. And my heart starts to race. And I know she feels my stuff and that I'm scared. And I know her bubble's really big. What's something I could do to like deactivate that warning that they've given me? Because she doesn't let anybody really close, but I know my heartbeat racing is not helping her trust humans anymore.
That's an excellent question. And that's tough, you know, when our heartbeat gets going, you know, to calm that down. So what you can do physically that will actually teach your brain, because that's what you're running into, is like you've achieved some rapport, but now you got to get to that next level, and it's hard to get there because these old warnings. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So what you can do physically to start reschooling your brain is to do things in sets of 3. So literally, this sounds really strange, but it's surprising. It works really well. Open and shut the door 3 times before you go in.
Okay.
If you've got an object with you, pick it up, put it down 3 times, like a rake or a fork or the halter. You know, if you're going to put a halter on the horse, bring it up to her 3 times before, and then step away before you do it. And the reason is that our brains and their brains learn in sets of 3. So the 3rd time, your brain is going to go, not dangerous. And the 3rd time she sees you do it, she's going to go, not dangerous. And it basically gives the nervous system a chance to assess what's happening. Otherwise, if you open a door and go in, the nervous system goes, what's happening? What might happen? And so is hers. So if you do it 3 times, by the 3rd time, both of your nervous systems are going, nothing's happening. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. And because I tried going in, because I was given instruction to go in and take her something off, and I went in 0 posture, and I was told I was looking like a predator. And I'm like, this is 0 from what I know. And that freaks me too. And their natural horsemanship and this kind of food to them. So I kind of do it on the down low, but I was just kind of wondering, like, okay, that sounds great to try the 3s, because I just know that she wants to be really close, because when she watches me groom other horses, she's right there.
Yeah.
But still not comfortable yet. And I don't get enough training at the rescue to work with her. So I thought I would try these techniques to see if I could make any progress. So hopefully this will work.
Yeah. And the other thing that you can try is a lot of go away face yourself. So if you,
Okay.
if you face her and then turn your head away, you're not deferring to her. You're not saying, I submit, I'm lower than you. What you're saying is, let's agree to space,
Okay.
right? So you're leading the dance, and that you're saying, hey, let's do it this way. Let's do a lot of go away face. And what you'll see is at first, she may just give you an ear flick or an eye, but then she's going to go into full-fledged go away faces. And then all of a sudden she's going to start licking and chewing and breathing and going, yeah, go away face is a good idea. So
Okay.
that's going to give her that communication that I don't want anything from you or about you. Let's have space. So when you're ready to move in, and if you're doing an O posture, you can have your shoulders relaxed and your fingertips touching, unless you have stuff in your hand. And really, O posture can be in your face. So if you're blinking and you're kind of like, chew some gum, even if just to, as long as you don't chew gum like, you know, but you just sort of, because if you're smacking your lips, you're saying, I don't bite.
Okay.
Okay. And if you're smacking your lips, it's also a signal that tells horses, hey, come here, come closer. Good eating over here. So I've caught horses that don't want to be caught by standing there and going, and they go, oh, good food. And they come right in. So there's a lot of really fun ways that are not as noticeable. You're not the first person to say, I'm working in a barn that does this other way or that other way. And they're like, wow, that stuff's crazy. So, you know, but you can do a lot of things that are not as noticeable, but it's noticeable to her.
Right. Perfect.
All right. Let us
Thank
know
you.
how it goes.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
And then we have a message here from Catherine. There is an off-the-track thoroughbred that is a big cribber. I've tried the greeting you suggested, and after 2, he starts nibbling at my hand or steps in and grabs my clothes.
Yep.
What to do?
So he's a cribber, and then he starts nibbling. So that shows emotional tension that he's trying to release through his mouth. So cribbers usually they can start because of pain, physical discomfort, but they often start because they're emotionally uncomfortable. So when he's chewing at your clothes, he's saying, I need something. I need something. I don't even know what I need, but I know that I need something. And so this is a situation where what I like to do with a horse who is mouthy for any reason is when they come in for that third greeting, I'll actually push in a little bit more. And I'm not pushing them away. I'm pushing in, and then I'm doing a circular motion like this with my hand right between their nostrils. And there's a ton of nerves right here. And, you know, the acupuncturist will target that. And there's all kinds of massage therapy techniques. You could do Masterson method or Tellington touch, or there's a lot of different sources to look at people who've worked on the mouth of a horse. But for our purposes, this is pretty safe because it's right between the nostrils, and you push in and you just do this little circular massage, and then you stop. And why that's important is you're saying, let me help you have some relaxation. And if they meet you and then you push in and massage their mouth, and you do that a couple, 3 times, maybe for sometimes horses like it like 6 times in a row. But at a certain point they go, I got it. And then you say, would you like me to massage your mouth some more? They go, no. And they not only do they stop chewing on you, but they stop chewing in general. Maybe they'll have a big yawn, but you've triggered the limbic system to kind of reset. And a lot of these horses, they don't know how to reset. Once they've lost their zero, they don't really know how to get it back. Or they can get it back maybe if they're out in the pasture by themselves, but they can't get it back with us or in these controlled environments. So doing that kind of massage into the muzzle. And if you start to massage and he tries to sneak around the side of your hand, you just want to be really careful. Don't let him sneak, because that's him going towards the play button. And he's going to do all that mouthy stuff again. So then you have to insist, no, staying right between your nostrils. Some horses, I'll do it one time and they go, oh, yep, I'm all set. I really don't want that anymore. And some horses will lean into it and say, more. I really, really need this. So whether it was physical discomfort that started it or emotional discomfort, those two kind of go together. One begets the other one, and then it's, so chicken and egg. But this I have experienced can really help that situation. And always be mindful, if a horse looks like he's going to bite your hand, then you would take your hand away. And you don't want to do something where you're going to startle and create a problem. But generally speaking, I've had really, really good results with this, even with really mouthy stallions. So you can try that.
All right, we have another question here. Can you say more about the joker? What is the purpose or role of the joker? And are they playful troublemakers? What are their qualities?
Okay, so the joker, what are their roles? Are they troublemakers? What are their qualities? Okay, if any of you have had a joker, then you're like, ah, the joker. So jokers, they get out and they let everybody else out. They know how to open handles. They know how to open doors. They get into everything. They're not afraid of things until they find something they're afraid of, and then they don't know how to handle it. Jokers generally keep the mood light. They're lighthearted. They're light-spirited. They're not mean-spirited. They might do what we call dumb things, but they're not mean. You know, they're funny. They actually make you laugh. You know, and that's their role in the herd, is to lighten things up and get people to feel playful and get the other horses to have some fun. What can be hard for a joker is knowing how to contain themselves. So other horses in a herd will contain a joker and say, okay, you can play with that barrel for a while now. I've had it. I want to take a nap, and that's disturbing me. So stop right now. So what jokers are looking for from us is to engage them with playful activities, but also have a way to say that's enough. So they actually need that boundary with us. But generally, jokers are kind of fun to have around, sometimes kind of troublemakers, because they tend to be really good at getting out.
All right. Next question is, if the horse isn't interested in, or protects a side when you approach, would that be a training issue, or would this be a communication issue?
Okay, so if a horse is not interested in you or protects one of their sides when you approach, that's not a training issue. That is a personal issue that the horse is having, and that's always something to communicate about. Now, from a training perspective, if you need to walk around that side of a horse, you need to set them up. Again, I'm talking about linking and layering, finding one place where you have rapport and building from there. So if I have rapport at the shoulder and I go to move back to the girth and they do this face when I get towards the girth, okay. So I'm at the shoulder. Can I go this far and come back? Can I go this far and come back? Can I go this far? And you're just going to start with what is working and slowly build up to what the problem is. If we target a problem, we're going to focus on something that already is a problem. If we target what's working or what's positive, then you're bringing enrichment to the relationship, and you're working with, hey, let me figure out why you're having a problem. What is the communication? So if, I had a horse at a rescue that had been stabbed with a pitchfork, and so he didn't want anyone on that side of his body. So that's not a training issue. That is going to be he had a pain issue. Nobody knew that for a while until somebody came along and said, I know that horse. I remember this story that happened to him. So we didn't know that. And if we had just taken it as, oh, I'm going to teach him how to let me be there, we would have missed it. So, generally, if a horse really has a hard time about something that seems a little off or a little weird, there's something going on in there. And I'm always going to say to that horse, well, how can I build up your confidence and build up the rapport and build up your trust and your respect of me so that I'm not going to hurt you. And once that's there and that's established, then if they also have a hard time bending on that side, or some, now the education can come in and I can say, let me help you learn how to do this thing. But at first, always it's about rebuilding or building for the first time that rapport.
All right, so we're actually a little over at this time, so we're going to just take one more question. And what we had talked about is to have Sharon do a recording on our own time of the questions that y'all have, because it will be much easier for her just to jump on and do a recording to answer your questions rather than typing emails. So if you do have questions, continue to email them to Heidi, and before next week's webinar, we'll address those questions for you all. And so the last one of the evening is, I have a dominant stallion, and when I use the go away face button, he will either come at our hand as we are bringing it toward his face, or he will try to nip after doing go away face.
He's very mouthy in general. So a lot of times, so here's an interesting thing about stallions. And in nature, stallions are responsible for wooing and soothing all of the mares and the herd. And they spend a lot of time with their mouth nibbling and licking and affection. And there's a lot of contact that they make. So they tend to be needy of connection in a way that's different than a lot of other horses. So what we perceive as just pure dominance a lot of times is actually frustration. And what we perceive as just plain nippy is actually an unmet need to have this different kind of emotional and affectionate connection. And I've worked with a number of stallions who have this very issue. And again, it's reaching the point where you can get in there to massage the mouth. And I've had sort of miraculous changes with these stallions once you can get there. And I know exactly what you're talking about trying to reach into the go away face, and they're doing this because they are having a socialization issue. A lot of times stallions are kept away from other horses for obvious reasons. And so now they have this frustration and this unmet emotional need. And then you have, I want you to give me some space, and they're ah! So one thing you can do is stay further away. So again, it's a great way to use a stall or any kind of barrier and have the stallion have to reach way over the barrier for the greeting. So he has to extend himself so far. There's no possibility he could nip your fingers because you're so far away from him. And then he's expressing his desire to greet and be greeted. So when you're at that level of distance and then you stand up and from here aim at his go away face and just hold it, just leave it and hold it. And he's going to look at it and I don't know what that means. And then all of a sudden he's going to, with his eyes, maybe he'll look that way a little bit, or maybe he'll flick an ear that way, or he'll drop his head a little. At that moment, I'm going to go, good. Yes, very good. And then come back in and stand up and point from here, way the heck away, not even in there, just point at the cheek or hold, sometimes I'll snap and hold my finger in the air like this, but I'm aiming in the vicinity of that quadrant that's on this side of his body. And you'll see them, it takes them a minute sometimes, and they go, do you mean this? And then I'm like, yay! So, you can have a wonderful expression of happiness about it. They recognize that feeling. And you can also just go back to your O posture and be like, good boy, that's what I mean. That's very good. So depending on who you are, you can do what feels right to you. But after you've done this a few times, you'll see stallions go, oh, greeting, go away face. I got it, And I have had a lot of success doing this with a number of stallions. And it takes them a minute sometimes to remember, the lessons mom taught them. But once they remember, they go, I know what you mean. And then you maybe need to lead them with your fingers here by the cheek. So as you're leading that horse, that high-headed sort of alpha dominant horse, you have your fingers right here. And that's soothing. It's instead of being repressing or controlling, it's actually soothing, because the whole time you're leading them, you're saying, give me room, give me room, give me room. And they're saying, okay, I now understand what it is you want. If your hand is down here under the chin, or you have a chain and your hand is right there, that's too much like, do you want me to greet it? Are we playing? It's at the play button? What are we doing with that? So if your hand is right back here, that kind of solves that issue. So just try that out and see how that goes. It can be a little bit tricky with these guys, but once they get it, and you just step back further, and then you can start to come in. That's the spiral in. Now you can just say, oh, I just mean, and maybe they don't want you to touch them. Maybe you just point and they go, that's enough. I don't want to be touched. Or maybe they finally get to a place where they're like, oh, that's kind of nice. And then you can even stroke them there. So I hope that answers that question.
That's it.
And that's it. All right. So we will follow up with some of the other questions and do another taping in a little while. Thank you so much for coming. And it's just really great to have all you guys here and keep us, let us know, your success stories too, because it's so wonderful to have these great stories come back and people are like, I got it, so we can share some of those too. All right. Thank you and see you next week.